I have been misgendered 3 times in the past 24 hours at restaurants.
Well, sounds like it's uMANoMiss. And some of you may be thinking that I just mispronounced uMANoMiss. I assure you, I did not. uMANoMiss is shorthand for you a man, not a miss. What's up, everybody? Ty Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. All right, so LilyTino, aka Pennywise, aka Buffalo Grills, is back at it again and showing her ass. And no, I'm not talking about on her OF profile. I am talking about out in these streets, complaining once again about being misgendered, which is the story of her life. And this time she's gone viral to the tune of 4 million views on TikTok, and she is loving it. I know she tries to make it seem like, oh, this is so tough on my life. And I'm going to tell you guys what I really think is going on with Miss LilyTino. But for now, let's get into this video.
I have been misgendered 3 times in the past 24 hours at restaurants.
Sounds to me like you're once, twice, 3 times not a lady. I really should warm up before I do these singing bits. And I kid, but I really do feel like I'm not trying to be mean, but I really do feel like if you get misgendered 3 times in one day, they say the third is the charm, and I feel like you should just have to go home and change. I know you guys are going to think I'm being silly, but I really do feel that way. I think that if you get misgendered 3 times in a 24-hour period, it is time to just pack it up and go home for the day. Close up shop. Send the employees home early. Also, how has Lily been transitioning for so long and made no progress? At this point, I'm beginning to feel like you should have kept your cake pops, Lily.
Last summer, I got my cake pops removed
Because you're not trying to really put in the work. I mean, I remember the first video I made about LilyTino, which was the one where she kept getting misgendered by all the servers, and each time she kept saying, oh, it's like a knife in the gut. Every time it happens, it's like a knife in the gut.
It is a knife in the gut. It's like a knife in the heart. It's just always like a knife.
Well, the world isn't going to change, Lily, to start to see you as a woman. So what you have to do is actually work towards looking more like a woman. And while we're on it, sounding like a woman too, because how is it your voice hasn't gone up not a single octave? You are still full man voice. And then the outside reaffirms that. While we're talking about gender affirming, your gender is being affirmed by everything that you're giving. You look like a man. You sound like a man. You are a man. Girl, we have got to do better. I mean, you always have to remember, if you're not selling it, people can't buy it.
Last night, I was at Benihana with my girlfriend, and the server said, what about you, sir? What would you like to eat?
Well, there's your problem right there, Miss Loretta. You should never be around Asians if you don't want to hear the truth. And I know I am Mexican, but I look Asian enough that a lot of Asians have adopted me at different points throughout my life, and never one to turn down upward mobility. I'm always willing to be adopted by Asians. And one thing I can tell you from hanging out with Asians, especially older Asians, is no one will give you your news faster than an Asian. If you're too fat, Asians will tell you you're too fat. If you're a man, Asians will tell you you're a man. If you're too thin, Asians will probably leave you alone, because being thin and rich are 2 of the only things that Asians really respect. But I'll tell you a story that really sums it up for me, for Asians and trans people, and the way that I've always seen it and what shaped me in my early years. One time I was at a casino back when I was living in Vegas when I was super young, and I was hanging out with these 2 trans girls that I had just met. We became friends through mutual friends. Their names were Khadijah and Shay. And Khadijah looks like Bernie Mac in a wig. I'm not exaggerating. If you were to see her, you'd be like, is that what happened to Bernie Mac? I thought he died. No, he is alive and well and living as Khadijah. Just playing, but I've never seen him in a room at the same time. But anyway, we went to this casino that has since been closed down called the Imperial Palace. And there was an Asian woman that was walking around with the change cart. And so Khadijah asked for some change because she wanted to gamble a little bit. So Shay, the other trans woman we were hanging out, steps in as the woman is getting Khadijah's change for her and says, excuse me. That's the way Shay talked. And the Asian lady says, hold on a second, I'm helping him. She had an accent, but I didn't want to go into doing the Asian accent, but I will do the him, because I always remember her saying, I'm helping him. And so Shay got offended on Khadijah's behalf because Khadijah is clearly supposed to be a woman, right? So Shay is like, excuse me, you're doing what? And then the lady says, helping him, and points right back at Khadijah. She gave real I said what I said vibes. And this is the way Asian people are. And remember, this was like the late 90s, early 2000s. You can complain to anybody you want about that stuff. But if you had told anybody in the late 90s, early 2000s that you had just been misgendered, first off, they would have said that's not a word. Because back then, the term misgendered didn't exist. And the only people that knew what getting your T clocked was people that were in the community at that time. And more specifically hung out with trans women or drag queens. And so there was going to be no shoulder to cry on. If she had told security, there's a good chance she would have got kicked out of the casino for being trans. Because if you guys don't know that story or haven't heard me tell it before, back at that time, it wasn't unusual for casinos to just kick trans women out because it was assumed that they were there to work. We'll go into it another time, but just trust me. So anyway, my point is, if you don't want your T clonked, if you don't want to be misgendered, don't go anywhere where Asians are.
My girlfriend, God bless her heart, steps in, says, actually, that's ma'am.
The server should have been like, girl, I know that's a man. That's why I just called him sir. And then the girlfriend would have had to been like, I said it's ma'am. And then the server could have repeated and been like, I know it's a man. I called him sir. And then it could have been like a new school who's on first. Am I the only one old enough to remember who's on first?
Who's on first? What's on second? I don't know who's on third.
That's what I want to find out. I want you to tell me the names of the fellas on the St. Louis team.
I'm telling you, who's on first? What's on second? I don't know who's on third.
I don't know what we're dealing with generationally in the audience today.
And she looks at my girlfriend and didn't really understand what had happened and said, no, I'm talking to him, pointing at me.
Oh, so she did give you the Khadijah treatment. She gave you the him. I'm talking to him. But if you notice, he said that the server looked at his girlfriend. Excuse me, I'm not meaning to misgender right there. That was a legit mistake. But that's how much just listening to the voice and seeing the visual that it really doesn't compute for you. Even when you're watching a video about that entire fact, it is so ingrained in us to know the difference between male and female that it is an honest mistake. And that, I'm glad it happened that way. And I'm not going to cut it out because I'm just making the point that the server genuinely did make a mistake. So if you see what to you looks like a man and may be wearing makeup, but in this day and age, it's not that uncommon for somebody to wear makeup. And then the voice comes out and you hear that, it's easy to make the mistake of acknowledging reality. I mean, I don't know any other way to put it in this case. I'm not even trying to be shady or mean, but that's really what LilyTino is mad at right now, is that somebody just acknowledged reality by accident. She would say, but the server would probably just be like, yeah, that's what that was. No green tea, no shade, girl. I just thought you were a man.
Our jaws were on the floor and we decided to leave.
What are your jaws on the floor about? Did your girlfriend not know you were a male and looked like a man? Because I've watched a fair amount of your content and you're always getting misgendered. So I don't really think any of these servers are your problem. Plus, if I remember correctly, or you haven't moved, you live in San Francisco, and San Francisco is so open to LGBTQ and the entire spectrum, every color of the rainbow. San Francisco is okay with it. So if they're not having it, maybe it's just not to be had. Besides, they're not gender affirming service industry workers. They're just servers. You order your food, you get your food, you shut up, and you leave. There's really nothing else to it. The servers aren't there to affirm whatever's going on in your head. The server is just there literally in a utilitarian position. And yeah, there is a little hospitality included, but as long as they're trying their best, then I think it's up to you to meet them halfway. Because with you not really doing a good job of portraying anything that looks like a woman to most of us, you can't expect your transition to happen in our heads. We cannot make the transition for you and be like, oh, okay, that's a woman, because you don't look like any woman that we've actually seen before. And I think you're a perfect example of why real women get offended by what calls itself trans these days, is because you really do make the mistake of thinking that just putting on some makeup and clothing that is typically associated with women makes you into a woman. And none of that is what makes a woman. And that's why women get annoyed and say that trans women or transgender people often think that being a woman is just about the superficial. So you really do confirm that, even though you're out here lying and saying that you're trying to educate on what trans is. Oh yeah, before we go any further, I'm just going to ask that you like, comment, and subscribe. We're on our way to 100,000 subscribers. We're just shy of 60,000 right now, so we're doing great. Do your part. Hit the subscribe button and check the bell to make sure that you're subscribed to all notifications. That way you know every time I upload. And while I tell you guys that I have had many transsexual friends, at the same time, I do understand when women say that some of these transgender people really are being insulting by just taking the most superficial parts of what they consider to be a woman, like the clothing and the makeup, and then thinking that's all it takes to being a woman. So while I do believe that there are actual transsexual people that suffer from gender dysphoria, I do not think this person would qualify as that. Or I feel like they would put in more effort, and they wouldn't want to publicly humiliate themselves every time it happens by having to voice it on camera. That is not the behavior, to me, of a person that has true gender dysphoria. This is a person that's really just trying to get those 4 million clicks, and we're here talking about it, and I've seen other people talking about it too. So they are definitely effective in that.
Because it was just a bad vibe after that.
I don't want to speak for anybody, but I would imagine if somebody were to interview the server, it probably was a bad vibe from the moment you walked in. And they probably were relieved once you decided to just take off. And I cannot understand why you would let the truth bum you out like that. But I would be willing to bet that they were happy to see you go. Because you may have considered yourself to have transitioned into a woman. I would say nay. You did not transition to being a woman, but you did transition to being a full-time Karen. And I will always stand by, Karen does not have a sex or gender. A Karen is a Karen.
And just a few minutes ago, I was at another restaurant for lunch, and they showed me my seat and said, "Here you go, sir." And I said, "I am not a sir."
Actually, you are a sir. You just don't identify as a sir, and that's your business. But what you have to understand is that the rest of the world is tired of having to worry about your business. If you want to identify as a woman, identify as a woman. Do it in your personal time, though. Don't bug the rest of us with it. People in everyday life, not just servers, but people in general, are just there to do their jobs and get out of it. And a lot of those jobs, people don't even want to work right now. So when you're considering that they're having trouble with staffing in the first place, and then you come in wanting to be victimized about a biological truth, it makes it so you're an undesirable customer in the first place. And I cannot stress this enough. If you actually looked like and sounded like a woman, you would naturally be addressed as such, because you would fool people's minds into believing that you are a woman. But if it's a year since you started posting this kind of content and you're still getting sir, it might be time to either hang it up or put it back on the grill. But whatever you decide to do with it, stop bugging everybody else.
And then I left because I wasn't comfortable anymore. And I went to a new restaurant and I asked, before I sit down, where's the bathroom, please? And they said, "Oh, it's right this way, sir."
On this one, maybe I can give you the benefit of the doubt, but I know you're not going to like what I say. Maybe on this one, they actually knew what you were getting at, but they don't care how you identify. They were letting you know subtly, or maybe you would say not so subtly, that they realize you're a male, and if you want to use the bathroom in their establishment, you will be going to the men's. So maybe the server thought in his head, let me show this standing piss of a woman where the men's bathroom is.
And I just left because I wasn't comfortable anymore.
you weren't comfortable anymore. Imagine how the women would have felt if you had walked into the women's bathroom. But I'm sure you're not at all worried about their comfort. You're only worried about your comfort. And that is a huge part of the problem. All this may just be your karma for being so inconsiderate of others while going through your day. And I've watched some of your other videos of recent, and I know that you're on this thing where you're thinking people don't want trans people to be trans in public. That's not the problem at all. It really is people like you that are constantly trying to make a point of the fact that you're trans, because I've hung out with too many trans people not to know that if you're taking your hormones the way you were supposed to and you are really working on yourself, you would definitely be more passable than you were a year ago. There's no way that wouldn't have happened. But you want attention and you want to lord over people with the fact that you're trans, because up until recently that has been legitimate currency, especially in a city like San Francisco. But I'm not playing with you, Lily. You're really gonna have to get it together and make some tough decisions coming up soon, because I really cannot make you aware enough that the world is moving past this. And while I do feel that true trans people will be able to exist within society without causing waves, I think the people like you are going to fall out of favor to a point that you will not be able to believe, and you will not recognize the world that you're living in, having been able to weaponize the fact that you're trans against people for so long. So I would say be on the lookout for that, LilyTino.
If you're a server in the food industry, you don't need to use words like sir or ma'am.
Actually, we've always used the word sir and ma'am, and nobody's ever had a problem with it until recently. The problem isn't with the rest of society. The problem is with you. And I'm going to tell you, as a person that's looked young most of my life, well, I wouldn't make a big deal about it, and I certainly wouldn't complain about it on any level. I actually do like when people call me sir. I spent so long in that boyish range that now I feel like after all these years, I have earned my manhood. I have earned my sirness, if you will. So having people like you wanting people not to use that very common and respectful language that some of us feel like we've gotten to the age, got my grays, we've gotten to the age where we actually do deserve that. Why don't you let us have that? Oh yeah, I forgot. This isn't about anybody else. This is about your comfort and the way that you think the entire world should live, speak, and conduct themselves. And we ain't going with it. Hate to tell you, Lil, but it's not gonna be your world.
There are ways to be respectful without using those words. And if you get it wrong for someone like me, I will probably leave the restaurant. And it puts like a bad vibe on my day when it happens, especially when it happens 3 times in a row.
Well, what I would say, Lily, and my best advice would be you really need to stop letting reality ruin your day. Reality should not mess up your vibe. And if it does, I don't really think anybody's going to care. I would also bet that if anybody watches your social media in San Francisco, they already know what your game is when you get there. And I wouldn't put it past them to accidentally do it on purpose just so that you will leave now that you put this out. Because nobody wants somebody that's just looking for a reason to say that something is wrong, which is what you've proven to be after all these months. Because at some point in the last year, a healthy person would either make corrections to try to make it so that this isn't really happening anymore, or they would just learn to deal with it. They would just accept that that's their reality and that's as far as they're ever going to go in their transition, and they're just going to have to deal with it. Because if it keeps happening over and over and you're admitting yourself that you don't think that they're trying to be malicious, then it really does become a point of an honest mistake. And while maybe we don't like when people make honest mistakes, we can't make a big deal of honest mistakes. We can't try to get them fired for honest mistakes. We can't try to get a free appetizer for honest mistakes, or whatever your game is. It just needs to stop, because this isn't anybody else's problem but your own. And I really don't believe that this happened 3 times in a 24-hour period to Lily, especially in San Francisco, because like I've already said, San Francisco is very open to that. They're very used to it. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of restaurants in San Francisco already use gender neutral in order to address people coming in, because they're so used to it. And if they didn't, they did. didn't. But I think 3 times in 24 hours, you would have been recording at least 3 times. We all know what you're like. You have your little mic right there. I wouldn't put it past you to secretly be recording people when you're thinking you're about to be misgendered or victimized by the truth. However you want to put it, you put it. But I really do feel that if this really had happened, you would have definitely had your camera and your mic out because you are that much of a ham. So I think you're just making this up because you knew that it would get you a lot of views. And also, you know that there is a chance that TikTok is going to shut down. So you really need to start plugging away and banking as much money as you possibly can. So I would be willing to bet, and you guys at home can keep score on your own, that LilyTino is going to start trying to really ratchet up the rage bait, which is what this is considered. It's meant just to outrage people and get comments. And the more comments you get, the more views you get. The more views you get, the more money you make. And so I really do feel like that's what this is designed for. And like I said, it was very effective. But I feel like in the coming months, it's just going to be a string of those types of things, because I have checked out Lily's other platforms as far as Instagram. Her Instagram is very low numbers. People don't really pay attention to it. TikTok is her bread and butter. Well, OF might really be her bread and butter, but this isn't about that. TikTok, as far as the mainstream social media, is her bread and butter. So like I said, I don't even believe these stories actually happened. I think she's going to start getting more and more outlandish so people can continue to react to her stuff, and she can really milk this until she figures out how to get people to migrate over to a different platform, or they make a decision on TikTok and decide that it's going to stay after all, because that's looking quite likely right now as well. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. If you want to see a video that was just plain fun that I did, check out the one on your screen right now. As always, thank you for watching. This has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world.
They bought into his bullshit.